get started. We have a full morning plan. We want to make sure that we are timely and we get you guys home on time, get those kids picked up on time. But we're so glad that you're here. We're so glad that you decided to invest this time in your relationship. My name is Noah Lamar. If you haven't met me, I just see on your way in. I'm the family pastor here at Northeast. And our team, our family ministry team, which is me, and then Gabby Alvarez, our children's pastor, Gabby Swanson is our youth pastor, are really passionate about families, obviously. But we know that part of having a healthy family, whether you have kids that are little, whether you have kids that are grown, right, you're still a family, we are still passionate about your health, and having a healthy relationship as a married couple or a couple is really important to having a healthy family. So we are excited to be able to support you guys and encourage you guys, and hopefully I'm here to learn as well because we certainly haven't figured it all out. So a few things, business things. You guys all have like a drink order on the table that if you want to fill those out, our cafe team through like during the first session, and they'll take notes and they'll make you like a latte or whatever. So if you have special instructions like sugar free or I don't know what special instructions you might have, you can write those on there as well, and they'll get those made for you. They'll come get them from you. They'll take your cards and then they will make drinks for you, which is super sweet of them. And our speaking of that cafe team, those are our students, our NSM students, and we have students doing food and drinks and childcare, and they're here just volunteering their time. They're not being paid; they just volunteer because they're amazing. And we wanted to keep this no cost because we wanted everybody to be here. But if you wanted to say thank you to the students, we have a couple signs around the room that have QR codes that you can make a donation to our student camp fund. And we told them like for being here, they get a discount on summer camp, which is it's a little bit warmer. It really will, I promise. Quick preview of the day. You are in session one, and Sheree, I'm going to talk more about in a minute, is going to teach session one. We're going to have a break after that. So at 10 o'clock, we're going to have a break. And during our breaks, we're going to give you some food, but we're also going to give you an opportunity as a couple to practice the tool that Sheree teaches. Because it is a big thing for me to not just teach things, but give people a chance to engage with those things and practice those things. So that will happen in the first break. 10:30, you'll be back in here for the next session. She's going to teach that again. And then we're going to do a practice within that session, and then you guys are going to have lunch. We get an order from Marciano. We've got the Italian beef and all sorts of good things that'll come in. We'll have lunch together. So lunch will have at our table so you get to know the couples around you. Our last session will be at 12, and Sheree will teach the last tool during that session, and then that'll be our day. So it'll go by quickly as you're planning it out. 4 hours can fly fast when you're really engaging in some good stuff. So our hope for this is that you really do walk out of this. Like I've been to a lot of marriage events, and some of them are more towards like encouraging and just giving you like a chance to laugh and experience some encouragement stuff. That's great. But just looking at our own marriage and the things that have been missing and are still missing, there's some tools that whether you've known each other a year or 20 years that you can grow and keep building. So that's really our heart today, is to help you guys with some tools. I love seeing young couples and older couples because there's not really, I've yet to meet a couple that has everything figured out and like perfectly. And if they were here, that'd be amazing too. So that's kind of the agenda of the morning, and why we're doing this thing of couples toolkit, why we called it that, why we're focusing on these 3 tools. Matt and I are going to share stories of our own marriage and how not having those tools was a problem. These are important tools that we can all grow in. And Sheree is here to speak. She's going to come up in a few minutes and teach, and she's here. We've been friends forever. We were just saying we met 20 years ago when Matt and I went on staff at the church that Sheree was on staff at in Madison, so we've known each other a long time. And then she was that experience as a pastor and also being, I was going to initially mix up LFT, licensed marriage and family therapist, right? So she's got that background, and is a speaker and has a lot of speaking for churches. Got a lot of gifts and a lot of things to share. She's also very real and authentic, and I really appreciate that. So thank you again. I've been to Eric seminar, and then we have it all figured out, and soon we can be just like X, and, good for them, but I feel more encouraged by people who are like, we've had a really hard time, here's what else. So, that's how I felt. So, I appreciate her and her, knowledge and understanding, but also just personality. She's a lot of fun. So, we're gonna have a good time. Also, I just figured it out. So that is the layout of the day. That's a little bit about what we're doing. Matt's gonna come up and we're just gonna give a little story, a little embarrassing story. Our first tool that we're gonna talk about is communication. And we're just gonna talk about how we didn't have that tool. So to set it up, Matt and I started dating in middle school, broke up, started dating in high school. So we've been together 5 years, we got married, dating for 5 years. We go to premarital counseling, and we took the Prepare and Bridge assessment, which is a great assessment, by the way. If you ever want a good tool to assess relationship and the tools in it, that's a good one. And it very accurately noted we were, we didn't have any skills in communication and conflict resolution. None. Like we just,
and those were zeros.
None. And really wise and like mature, he's been in ministry for decades, pastor, looked at us and he said, you know what? Right? You're Christians. Your parents are so married. You will figure that out. But we did not figure it out. We did not.
I did not find that advice to be helpful.
It made us very hopeful, maybe a little delusional. Like, oh, it's great to see. It
last
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that we don't know how to communicate. We're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And we were fine. We were totally fine. That's the problem, right? Like, we didn't fight. We didn't have major yell at each other. We were fine.
No, we were so nice to each other.
And so proud of how nice we were. So we'll get to that part later. But communication. We were like going through communication was a hard one for me to hone in on. I could very easily identify how we didn't have conflict resolution skills and why that was a problem. Communication is harder because we're both wordsmiths. So in some ways we communicate very, very well. And I would guess this is true of your relationship. If there's some areas you communicate really well. We can talk about parenting, and we can talk about faith, and we can talk about logistics really well. Very good at those things. What I now realize is what we didn't know how to talk about was feelings and what we needed. We didn't know how to communicate our needs, and we didn't know how to communicate our feelings, so we just didn't. We just didn't talk about those things.
Yeah, it was fine. Just like the guy said.
It was great. It was great. We were Christians. So here's how this actually played out. Like, it didn't play out in big problems, which is why it just cracked below the surface for a long time. So I said, like, we didn't know how to talk about feelings. And really, what I mean about that is I didn't know how to talk about feelings. So you're gonna hear, how many of you have heard, like, women are emotional and men don't do feelings? Okay, in that scenario, I am the man, and he is the woman. We are complete opposites on that spectrum. So every marriage thing we went to, I was like, let's talk about our feelings. Matt was like, why am I the woman? I'm like, why am I the man? But it was like actually really shameful. Like, I'd be in those conferences, and he was the guy who figured it out, right? He's actually right. He's figured out how to hack feelings. What a man. What a man in touch with his feelings. And I'm over here like, I just don't have feelings. They just don't happen to me. And that's a problem, right? Like, that's not good. So those conferences didn't help us. Those sessions and those books, we didn't look at respect, we didn't talk about marriage, we did all the things, and I walked out of them being like, I fail at being a girl. So that's a bummer. So whether we were having an argument, which we didn't really do, but whether we came to some tension or whether we hit a crisis, right? And we had some major crises. Like, we had some major kids in hospital, and lost pregnancies, different things. So like things like that, big things. He would come to me and start talking about how he felt. Man, like, I really, this is really hard for me. I can't even find feeling words. That's okay.
They get right at the surface.
Right.
Right at the surface. Like, access them easily, talk about them.
Yeah.
I would, be tearing up as I'm talking, and then I'd ask, how are you doing? How are you doing? How's it going? How are you feeling?
The
Hear
pressure.
anything? I don't hear anything.
I hear no.
So it made me feel like I was doing something wrong, like, oh, so I kept asking, and I didn't.
Yeah, so he would ask, and I would have nothing.
Didn't draw us closer. Those questions didn't draw us closer.
And the more he asked, the more I felt bad for having nothing, and I'd be like it just felt like my head just floated out, like I just couldn't access my feelings, and you probably experienced it. I just didn't want to share them.
Yes.
Which
Yeah, it was like it created distance.
Right, and you wouldn't even say, man, it feels like you don't want to share your feelings. Like we just didn't know how to talk about it, so it was just a cycle we went over and over again. And until what was really powerful in the last year is we were in marriage therapy, and we were talking about, again, one of our kids in the hospital, he had access to his feelings. The therapist is asking me, well, what about you? Like, I just don't know. Like, I just don't have access to them yet. And I've been in therapy enough that I now know I will get access. But I just don't have them right away. And then by the time I access them, he's moved on. So it feels weird. And they go, hey, can you have my feelings now? Because he's a little like salty that I wouldn't answer his questions. And our therapist just said, oh, okay, so Matt accesses feelings right away. He can talk about them. Does it bother you to go out and he talks about them? No, I really appreciate
and that was news to
me.
me.
I love hearing about feelings. It's so great. If somebody has feelings, I just don't. And then he would be like, well, you access them a few days later. And then, I'd like, oh, I'm ready to talk with you. He's like, does it bother you, Matt, if feelings come a few days later? So he's like, so it's not a problem? Like, we just made it a problem? Because we couldn't name it. Like, we didn't have the communication to go, this is a thing, here's what it is. And once we named it, and now we know it's a thing, like he just held his feelings, and I'm really empathetic. That's very easy for me. I can be empathetic, and I'm like, thanks for sharing. It helps me name some things here. And then a few days later, if I come back, he's now mad at me, and I feel like, hey, I got the feels now. We can talk about it. And it's so great for it to not be a thing. It just is who we are. So that's like one small example, and there was a ton of work in between of how to get the tools to even have that communication and talk about it. And Sheree's going to give you some of that today. But I'm sure you have those things, right? You probably have a thing in your mind like, oh yeah, this is a thing we run into that we just don't know how to talk about, and so we
trip it over.
don't. So being able to talk about things, being able to communicate is how you kind of just start unlocking whatever that is. Again, I don't know. We're still learning. We're still not great at it. We're still really bad at communication. So we're gonna go sit down and learn some things. I'm gonna pray as Sheree comes up. I'm gonna pray for you guys. If you guys want to do a prayer release with me and take a moment in your posture. God, we're so grateful that you have created us for relationships. You've created us to be connected to one another, and that everyone in this room is here because they care deeply about the relationship, and they care deeply about another person, God. And as much as we know and love and thrive in relationships, they're also hard work. And so today we come with open hands, and we hold our hands open, ready to release the things that are tripping us up, ready to release the things that maybe we hold on to even without knowing, the things that get us stuck and pull us apart. And we release those things to you so that we can receive new tools that will help us connect with one another and connect with you as well. So we are excited for the good things that you have for us today. Bless Sheree as she comes to speak, and bless us as we listen with open hearts.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for giving up your Saturday. I appreciate it. If you had a chance, you probably saw the first handout, The Benefits of Marriage. And this is one of the reinforcers to let you know that being married is a good thing. These are just a few of some of the research-supported benefits of marriage. And so it's worth it. Whoops, just dropped my glasses. It's worth it for you to spend some time continuing to invest in your relationship. Mitch and I have been married 40 years, and Matt and Noelle were on staff with us in Madison in 2006. Our marriage hit the wall, blew apart, ministry blew apart, and We didn't know if we would stay married. We had to leave ministry, and Matt and Noelle, um, I could go on, but they are part of a crew that meant the world to us, and also their unconditional love. And what a testimony of God's grace and their friendship and love, because now, almost 20 years later, we all still love one another. And our marriage blowing up had huge impact on our staff. And it was not just that they stood around and loved us, they also then had to make big decisions about their own lives and their own futures. And so thank you for loving us through all of it. So there's history there. So like Matt and Noelle, I come to you, yes, as a marriage and family therapist, but also as a married lady who has had real struggles and real hardships, and times where we had to be in counseling and we needed help, times where we weren't sure what the future was going to be for us. I'm glad that we're still together. I still adore my husband. He's so cute and he's so sarcastic and funny. And when he and Matt get together, it's quite a combination. So all that to say, investing this morning in your relationship is so wise. And I'm going to try to give you some tools that are not just my ideas or things that I've seen play out as I've helped different couples as a therapist, but also that are supported biblically and supported by our research. So that's always important to me, that it's not just good concepts, but they're things that have been shown to really be beneficial. And so let's dig in. So the benefits of marriage, you can kind of discuss and read that on your own, but my favorite one on this list is that married people live longer, the very first one. Because if I'm going to be married, I want to live a long time with my person. And if I'm going to work hard on my relationship with my spouse, I want to reap the benefits of that. So I'm glad that in general, married people live longer. So those benefits you can remind yourself when you're having a hard day with your spouse. Just take out that sheet and remind yourself. Okay, let's dive into some tools for communication. So one of your handouts, you will see evidence-based gender differences in communication. And this is such an illustration of what Noelle was talking about, because these are found in the research, but the big point of this is there are always outliers. There are always couples who this does not apply to, or perhaps is kind of the opposite. But let's look at some trends at what some of the research tells us. Women use conversation, and it's this handout with the 2-pager. Women use conversation to achieve closeness. This is their pathway to intimacy. Talking makes them feel connected to their partner. For women, communication is the glue that holds the relationship together. So that tends to be true. Men, on the other hand, use conversation for reporting and giving information. Rather than conversation, men use doing things together. That's how they tend to build connection. So that's important to know, that if that applies to your marriage, that can help bring a lot of insight right there. Women, often their process is to say the words out loud, having that dialogue with someone in order to understand their own feelings. I don't really know what I'm feeling until I start talking about it, because the way my brain works is I'm figuring it out. That oral process helps me to identify. Men, on the other hand, for men, talking's more about exchanging information. Men show greater tendency to protect themselves and secure their position or their posture through conversation. Women's communication looks to build rapport, seek and give confirmation, and reach consensus. A lengthy and deep conversation often results in a woman feeling connected and closer to that person, even if they started out as strangers or acquaintances. But look at men. Conversation for men and dialogue are about showing their concern by offering solutions and solving the problem. And men show greater tendency to label it as it was a good talk if they solved a problem. I see some of you smiling. And if you have to poke one another, go ahead. That's allowable. Go, that's you, or that's me, or that's not us, or you can do that in this day. In general, men use fewer words than women. That's in general, right? But there's always exceptions. So just be aware if you don't fall into some of these generalizations, it's okay. Women, page 2 now, women are more likely to label it as it was a good talk if feelings have somehow been shared. So if women exchange feelings with their spouse or with another friend, that was really a good talk. I feel closer to that person. Men use conversation to negotiate their status in the group and keep people from pushing them around. Isn't that interesting? It's not often an overt thing, but it's an unconscious thing that often men demonstrate in their communication. Women, on average, daily use more words than men, and this can be seen in early childhood. You watch little girls, you watch little boys, and they actually account for all the words being spoke. And time again, the research shows that little girls tend to use more words. So it starts young. So we often think and there's some information that talks about it can often be a brain thing. In utero, the wash of testosterone over boys tends to affect the brain with just enough slight differences that some of those play out in the communication center in the brain. Anyway, that's for another day. In general, now this is a big one. So in general, women show a greater tolerance for and a resilience to conversation. Their brains seem slower to reach a heightened stress response of fight, flight, or freeze, or now there's a new one, fawn. During conversation, women, their blood pressure, heart rate, perspiration levels remain steady for longer periods of time before showing signs of distress. And this often allows the woman to pursue the listener and keep the conversation going. And this is unconscious. It's a reflexive reaction for the woman. In the men, it's just the opposite. It tends to be the opposite. So if you hook men's brains up and their body has got different sensors and electrodes or whatever, and you see a husband and wife in conversation, a men's body is going to show very much quicker than a woman's body that they're in a state of arousal, in the sense of their senses are heightened, their levels of perspiration go up, their heart rate goes up, their body shows and brain shows, it registers in that area of distress, that area of the brain that says, this is dangerous, this is dangerous. Now it's unconscious, right? Even though they know it's not maybe physically dangerous or anything like that, but men tend to get to a higher state of that arousal point of their body, and their biometrics show up. And so women can't, and again, generalization, a lot of times women can't relate to that. And so for me, I can talk forever. And and I'm not heightened. I know I don't feel like I'm in a dangerous, this doesn't feel emotionally or physically or psychologically dangerous for me. So I just keep talking to my husband. And early in our marriage, about the first month, we were in deep conversation on a Saturday morning, and he needed to use the bathroom. And so our tiny little apartment, he walked into the bathroom. I just followed him right in. And he sat down on the toilet, and the bathtub was just, literally right there too. So I sat on the edge of the bathroom and I just kept talking. And he looked at me with his eyes wide and his mouth open. He's like, I can't do this. I can't have you follow me to the bathroom. And I realized, oh, yeah, that was probably a little inappropriate. Everybody needs a little privacy once in a while. And that's such an illustration of, I didn't see anything wrong with that. Nothing, there was no red flags, but for him, it was like, stop. So the whole point of this first handout on gender differences, whether you fit these generalizations or not, is to think about the biological differences that happen that are often unaccounted for, and it helps it to become non-personal. So I can look at these things, and my husband pretty well fits into this profile, and when he's exhibiting these things, I don't take it personal. I'm not in a place where I'm like, I just can't believe you can't talk to me and we don't talk. No, I can go, oh, I get it. This is just kind of how your brain works. I don't need to take this personal, and I don't need to pursue and harass you. This is just how you're wired. So men and women, same goes. Men, you can look at this, and if your wife kind of fits some of these profiles, you can go, oh, I get it. She's not trying to badger me or nag me. She's just pursuing and she's talking and has a lot of words because she's just figuring out what she's thinking and feeling by processing. So that's an important piece. So now, look, and here's the dangerous thing. Well, I don't have any way to tell time. So if you can just yell at some point. Okay, all right. All right. It's only 9:12. Okay. Okay, that sounds perfect. Okay, so now let's look at tools for communication and conflict resolution. Okay? The big category where couples often, or any of us as human beings, get into trouble is we underestimate the power of nonverbal communication. A person experiences you with all your nonverbal communication long before they are going to experience you and get a sense of you by your words, by what you actually say to them. The moment you're within the presence of someone else, it's our brain goes into that high level of assessing who is this other human being within my sphere, within my circle. And immediately we are taking in all that data. What do they look like? What is their facial expression? What's their body posture? How do they move in the room? What are their eyes doing? What are their eyebrows doing? What's their forehead doing? And so this often gets us into trouble in our marriages because we focus on the words that we say or don't say. But often the struggle and the frustration comes not in the words, but in the non-verbals. So first big thing is tone of voice. When you're talking to one another, what is the tone of voice? And we know from the research that we are not very good at being predictors of how our voice is coming across. I can think, I said it nice. I talked nice. And my husband heard a little sharp on the edge, a little harsh, a little hateful maybe, or indifferent. He heard that in my voice. And I could argue, I was not indifferent. I was just maybe in a hurry, or I was just maybe, my mind was on other things, and don't take it so personal. And you get into that spiral thing. And so it's my responsibility to take the feedback he's giving me. And he has learned how to give me good feedback. He has learned to say things like, hey, you sound really mad. Are you mad? Oh, no, babe, I'm not mad. Or, yeah, I am kind of mad. So we cannot be the judge of what our tone of voice is. The hearer has to and gets to be the person to give us that feedback. Now, we'll talk later about how to give that feedback in a kind way. So tone of voice, and very often we mistake. So sometimes when I am really sad, and if my emotions don't go to crying and tearful, I have a tone of voice that sounds angry. And so we had to learn early on that often he thought I was really angry, and I was just trying to keep it together so I didn't cry. And so that caused, you can imagine, all kinds of difficulties in our marriage. So really being aware get that feedback, and then monitoring your tone of voice. And it's again, all of these things are things that we just have to become intuitive. No, we have to become intentional. We want it to be intuitive, but it isn't. And intentional is the key word. And body language, and I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but body language is key, right? I had a couple come into my office, and it was their first session, and they were struggling, and she explained, she fit the profile. She had lots of words. She explained what she thought was their problems and what they needed help with. And her husband just sat and looked at the floor. And as a young therapist, I thought, oh, he is not liking me. He won't look me in the eye. I can just imagine she drug him here, and he's not happy, and he's not going to talk, and he's not going to be cooperative. And through the whole session, he just stared at the floor, didn't hardly say more than 2 words. And the next session, because then I usually take each one individual for a few minutes. And so in the second session, he came in for his individual time. And I said, how did you feel about our first session together? And he got very tearful. And he said, I feel ashamed, I feel embarrassed, and I feel scared because I don't know how to do all this. Now, see, I had read his body language from the first session completely wrong. It was a good lesson. We have to monitor our body language, and when we get that feedback from our spouse, that when I look a certain way, I am not even aware, but if that looks a certain way to Mitch, if my brows are furrowed and if my hands are on my hips, or if I'm just, looking off over here, or I'm watching my phone, I have to receive that feedback that that's giving him a message that I don't think I'm intending. Sometimes I am. And then I have to fess up, right? I have to own it. Okay, so energy level. Here's a big one. Energy level. In your relationship, it would not be uncommon for one person in the couple to maybe be a little more animated, and the other person in the couple is just a little more non-animated, just a little more poker face, or just not quite as expressive. Now, it is difficult when you, and in our marriage it's me, when you're more animated, it's very often like I come across, and my husband's like, oh. Well, then I take that personal, like, well, you must not really, I must be bothering you. You must not want to listen, or this must not be very important. And he's like, no, it's real important. And so then I've had to give him that input. Well, could you show a little enthusiasm or engagement? He had no idea he was coming across that way. And so think about, and then the reverse is true. My husband is more reserved. And so if he's trying to talk to me and I ratchet up my voice, the pitch and the pace that I'm talking, I'm like, oh, and really? Well, he's like, whoa, down, girl. So I want to try to match his energy if he's the one that initiated the conversation. And he does better at trying to match my energy if I'm initiating the conversation. Again, it's a nonverbal, but something we have to kind of be mindful of. Eye contact. Our phones have completely ruined our culture for eye contact because we watch our phones. And I've had to just get used to this, especially in groups with younger generations, because I have come to learn they really can listen to me while they're on their phones. And I just accept that. I don't fight that. That's part of now how their brain is already wired from early childhood being conditioned. And so quite often with a young person, I will let them scroll through their phones because it's less confrontational and they actually may hear me more. But with my spouse, I want, when I'm trying to communicate something of substance, with any kind of communication that has any emotional weight to it, or any logistics that are really key to how our day or how our week's gonna go, I want him to look at me, and he wants me to look at him. And so eye contact is very important. It's also important to think a little bit about, if you struggle making eye contact, just do a little personal reflection. I wonder why that is. I have clients that will never look at me. They always look off, whatever. And I don't want to push them, but in my own marriage, that is a conversation that we have, is, hey, it's important to me because for me, it says my husband values me to give me his full attention. And he could be giving me his full attention even while he's doing something else, but that I wouldn't know that. The only way that I know he's giving me his full attention is he's making good eye contact. That's another important nonverbal. And then physical touch. And this can go all over the board on the spectrum. So it is very important, if your spouse is a toucher, a physically affectionate person, and does a lot non-sexual touch, and they are using touch to get your attention, it's important that you kind of lean into that, and that's a cue. If your person is not, if your spouse is not comfortable, or it's not a part of their personality to use physical touch, and if you reach over to them, and that almost makes them more uncomfortable, then it's important to have that conversation, because Either end of the spectrum is going to be a barrier to good communication. Because if I'm not into a lot of physical touch and my husband just reaches over to put his hand on my hand to get my attention to say something really of substance, and I'm not a physical touch person, I'm going to be more zeroed in on, oh, please don't touch me, please don't touch me, please don't touch me. I want to have my bubble around me so that I can feel safe and then I can hear what you're saying. Or the opposite is true. I'm a touchy person. And so when I reach over and put my hand on his hand as I'm talking to him, I'm trying to engage with him. Now he knows that. And he tries to meet me at that point. So physical touch is an important cue. Also, what is your whole facial expression doing? What do your, and it sounds ridiculous and silly, but ask your spouse or ask your kids, what do my eyebrows do when I'm talking to you and I'm upset about something? Am I, because we don't think about that. What does my forehead do? What do my hands do? What does my mouth look like when I'm really trying to talk about something of significance? Because most often you're not looking in the mirror when you're talking to your spouse and having some significant communication. So that's key there. First piece of tools for communication, pay and conflict resolution. Pay close attention to your nonverbals. Any nonverbals that you think of that aren't on our list, that play themselves out in your life? Any nonverbals? Other nonverbals? Okay. All right. Mechanics of good communication. The first one, and these aren't in any real order of importance, but they're all things I want you to think about. Choose the right time, okay? I'm terrible at this. I still have to work at it 40 years later. Choose the right time, because as soon as the thought comes to me, I think that's the right time. Even if it's, because I've laid in bed awake and it's now 1 a.m. and I'm like, can we talk? Or, hey, can we talk? And my husband is like, you gotta be kidding me. It's 1 a.m. Can't this wait? Yes, it can. So I have mastered that. I can wait till morning. That's good. That's good. And I also have learned, don't do it when he's already has dove into something he's trying to figure out for work, or something my husband's a big baker, so don't try to have some big talk with him while he's in the middle of putting together a recipe and baking, because I'll be the loser on that end, tell you that. Cookies won't get done. So choose the right time. And this is what's hard, is we often feel the intensity of whatever it is we want to talk about. And so we often pursue, like, oh, we got to talk about this right now. But you're going to have the not desired outcome. Because if this isn't the right time for your spouse, they're going to be like, not hearing you, not hearing you, not hearing you, I'm not hearing you. So do yourself a favor and figure out when is a good time. And sometimes it's really helpful to ask. And one strategy that works for us is one of us will say to the other, hey, when can we talk about something? There's something I want us to talk a little bit about. Is this a good time? And often it maybe wouldn't have been, but the listener is so curious that now they will actually pause and focus and say, okay, well, yeah, just tell me, let's talk about it right now. But you see, it goes both ways for us. We give the listener just enough of a pause for them to make that mental adjustment of, oh, we can talk now. And then sometimes we can't, and we have to be honest and say, you know what, honey, I'm so tired, or I'm so focused on this other thing, or I'm so whatever, or this just isn't a good time. And be honest. Hey, can we do it later? Can we do it tomorrow? Could this wait till Saturday when the kids are at the grandparents and we have some time together? Could this wait till, we spend an hour in the car? So remember, when the Bible talks about don't let the sun go down on your anger, it doesn't mean you have to solve everything before you go to bed. That's not a good strategy. You can wait most of the time and choose an optimum time so you'll get the outcome that you want. Location, location, location. The importance of where the conversation takes place. We underestimate this too. Very often, we begin to develop, and this is unconscious, we begin to develop an emotional association with locations that have had negative impact on us. And so if all my hard, difficult talks happen in the kitchen or happen in our living room, and that's just always where that happens, then over time, my husband begins to associate, hey, this is not really a sanctuary for me. This is not really a place where I can just relax, because there is that unconscious fear that the minute he sits down, puts his feet up on the ottoman, and is holding his coffee and just trying to, kick back, there's a little bit of a barrier for him, because emotionally, unconsciously, he is associating this room isn't really about relaxation. This room is really about, when Cherie sees I'm sitting here, she thinks it's her opportunity to dive into something. That can also happen if you always, dive into something in the car. Then our spouses begin to associate the car with being a location of, ugh, I don't want to go on that trip. Ugh, we're going to have to talk and listen, and it's really, ugh. So think about location. If you have opportunity, try to pick a neutral location. Pick somewhere in your house that, don't do it in the bedroom. That doesn't usually work well either. Do it and sometimes that doesn't work. It's not that this is a hard and fast rule, but it's just something to consider. Okay, approach with an attitude of curiosity rather than assumption. When there's something significant that I need to talk to my husband about, something that's maybe got some weight to it, there's very often my first reaction is, I just need to go tell him how this is. We just need to talk about this, and then I dive in. Rather than approaching with, I'm curious, I have these thoughts, I have this concern, I'm curious what my husband's perspective is on this. If I approach him with a sense of curiosity, it naturally reduces my adrenaline and reduces my vulnerability to come across too harsh, come across too amped up and animated. And it also puts you in a mindset to hear what they had to say. I'm curious about Noelle, what she thinks of raising teenagers, rather than next time we have coffee, I'm just going to tell her some things that I've learned or that I've seen about teenagers. Listen to the shift that happens. I want to talk to my husband about the fact that he still 40 years later leaves cupboard doors and drawers open. And as I left this morning, true story, the cupboard to the coffee was still open, and we had been up since 5:30. And I thought, 40 years, he still leaves cupboard doors open, and it makes me nuts. We have a nice house. I want the cupboard doors shut. I don't want cupboard doors open. It looks sloppy and messy. And for Pete's sake, the doors are meant to close. Now, if I go home tonight and I come at him with that posture, it is going to be a different discussion than if I come at him with, hey, babe, I'm curious. I'm just curious, like, what that's like for you. Like, you open a drawer or you open a cupboard, and quite often you just walk away and you don't close it. So I'm just curious, if you're deep in thought, or if you figure you're going to go back to it soon anyway, so why shut the door? Which is a stupid example, but you get. And then think about when it's with even bigger, more serious weighted topics. Yes, are we at the time? Okay, all right. Okay, so let's keep going. As you can tell, I'm the verbal one in our marriage. Don't interrupt or talk over the other. I cannot tell you how many couples come to my office and they constantly interrupt one another. Makes me crazy. I have to own my own stuff on that as a therapist, because my natural human response is I want to reach out and take him by the collar and say, would you shut up and let him finish? Let him finish, or let her finish. But I don't. I try to remain professional. So, and talking over the other, because then neither of you, that is a clue that perhaps you're both thinking more about what you want to say rather than really listening. Just a little bit of a clue that might be what's happening. Speak in complete sentences. Again, we often don't realize we do this. This is often a family of origin pattern that's picked up in early childhood when you're developing language skills as a toddler. But quite often, people will talk in half a sentence. And so I have a couple couples like that right now. One or both talk in incomplete sentences. And I honestly, in my head, sit there with my notepad and I'm writing down, I don't know what they're saying. Because they are jumping and they're never really finishing hardly any of the sentences. And then in one couple in particular, I can see that the husband doesn't know what his wife is saying because she doesn't finish her sentence. She knows what she's saying. And she's a highly intelligent person, so it's probably a part of her brain and intelligence. She just keeps jumping because it makes perfect sense in her mind. So monitor, ask, get some feedback. Do I need to speak more clear? Do I need to complete a thought? And with that, I don't think it's on. Oh, yes, it is. Okay. Speak in a few sentences at a time. And I had to learn this because I will give you my whole diatribe, my whole thesis on whatever the topic is, whether it's dish towels or whether it's the importance of our sex life or whatever. I mean, I'm going to give you the whole encyclopedia version. And by sentence number 3, my husband's like, I'm out. I don't hear anything you say. Talk in bullet points. Especially if you know you're the verbal person, talk in bullet points. You can always go back and revisit or share more, but learn to speak in a few sentences at a time. Ask open-ended questions when you guys are talking with one another about topics that are weighted or topics that are more complex or something that's more than just logistics. Ask a lot of questions because questions lower defensiveness. And the other person has a chance to really share and is much more apt. So things like, hey, can you tell me more about this? Or, well, what do you mean exactly? Okay, so, well, how is this for you? Well, what are you feeling right now? Okay, babe, what's the most important thing for me to understand? Well, hey, could you explain this in a different way? What am I missing? When you ask questions, it's telling, especially in marriage, it's telling your spouse, I want to get it. I want to get it. Now, what I should have said with all of these things today, one of the biggest barriers to any of these tools is for quite a while, they don't feel natural. And this one is a good example of that. If I start asking open-ended questions, and I never really did that before, my husband's going to be like, would you shut up? This is not you. Why are you talking that way? Right? It feels inauthentic. Don't give up. Stick to it. If you never made good eye contact before, and now you're going to really, your spouse is going to be suspicious at first. Your spouse may be like, why are you being weird? Why, this is weird. Okay, stick to it. Stick to it. These will change your life. They will. They've certainly changed ours. So asking open-ended questions is so important because it allows the other person to feel validated, and it allows you as the listener to really understand and be curious. It's your way of really wanting to be curious and hear what they're trying to say to you. If you're not in a mode to hear and to listen, then that's when you go back to pick a better time when you can. Listening makes or breaks the quality of the communication. That's not new news to any of you. What it takes to be a good listener. Focus. Focus on the other person. An attitude of curiosity, making eye contact, restate or paraphrase. And again, this can feel very contrived. It can feel very inauthentic at first, but it's a powerful tool. So if my husband says, man, I don't want to go with you Saturday to the thing at Matt Noel's. I just need the time and space at home. And my way early on would be like, oh, so you don't want to go to the thing at Matt Noel's? You need the space and the time? And he would look at me and go, shut up. Stop repeating what I'm saying. It would bug him. Well, but we kept at it, and I got better. So now this morning, he said, hey, I don't really want to go to the thing at with Matt and Noel because he's a teacher, And he said, I really need the space and time to dig back in now and get ready for Monday. And I said, oh, babe, I get it. I get it. I know. It's just Monday's coming, classes are coming, you got to be ready to go. And so, see, my way of restating wasn't, it's gotten a little better. It's not just parroting. But if you have to start by parroting and saying the exact, do it. And spouse, just be gracious. Know that they're not just trying to do that kid thing where you repeat everything the other person says and it drives them nuts. No, they're really trying to hear and understand you. So paraphrase or restate what you heard that person say. It means you're listening. It means you're really trying to hear them rather than sitting there trying to quickly think about how you're going to respond. Ugh. So, ask follow-up questions. Allow the speaker to fully finish their thoughts. There was a study done, and people were asked to just say their thing and get it out of their system, like say something that's bothering you and talk about it till you feel like you got all your whatever about out verbally. And the average time for people was 3 minutes. And so I used to get worried as a therapist, like, oh, people are going to go on and on and on and on and on. But then I just remind myself, on average, they're just going to give me at the most maybe 3 minutes. I can sit here and be attentive for 3 minutes. And I shared that with my husband, and so I tease him now, babe, you got 3 minutes. You got 3 minutes. Give me 3 minutes. Just let me vent and spout off at this. And then I try to honor his time and my time and keep to my word. So let them fully finish their thoughts. Validate their feelings. So that means you're saying things like, ooh, I could see why that would be hard. Or, oh, wow, oof, sounds like you were really mad. Or, oh, okay, am I right that I'm sensing a little frustration? Or, I see a look on your face. Wow, it's like a lot of feelings. Now, again, if you're not used to doing that kind of thing, your spouse it can get aggravating, but it's an act of love and it's an act of service because it tells me Mitch is really listening to me. And even if it sounds a bit mechanical initially, you'll grow in that and it does become more of a natural part of your communication. Pretend the speaker is your boss. If your spouse is trying to talk to you and you pretend they are your boss, I'll guarantee you're going to be a better listener. I can pretty much guarantee it. It's reminding yourself to take a posture of respect. I respect you enough, Mitch, that I'm really pausing. I'm quieting my inner voice. I'm quieting whatever is a distraction and background noise, and I'm focusing on you. And I may not have any response. I may not have any thoughts. And this is Mitch saying this, but the fact that he focuses in and he listens is a powerful message, an important message, more important than maybe the content of what we're really even talking about. Set your phone aside, please. When it's your spouse or your children, please set your phone aside. Please, 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 please. It just is another way to say you're important to me. Okay. That was like the fast hurricane version. Now, this is what you're going to get to do when you practice this today. And of course, you're not going to have opportunity maybe to enlist all of these things. But today during practice, I want you to pick one of these questions, or if you've got something else on your own, that's fine too. So you could choose from this question, what's one thing you overcame in childhood? And it's okay if you know your spouse kind of already knows a bit about it, but so that's one question you could choose, something that I overcame in childhood, or something people think about me now, they think it's true, but it really isn't. So some people think I'm shy, which is hard to believe, but in my family setting, I'm very quiet because my siblings are loudmouths. And so so it could be something that people think about you now that really isn't accurate or true, and you can talk about and share what that is. Or another question that you could to choose to talk about is something that you've always wanted to do. Maybe it's a bucket list thing, but something that you've always wanted to do and why. Okay, so there's some questions, and if you've got another, so these questions are a little bit of substance, so it's more than just talking about the weather. So you got that, so you could choose something you overcame in childhood, you could choose talking about something that is people think about you that isn't true, or assume about you that isn't true, or talk about something that you really want to do that perhaps is a bucket list, and why you want to do it. And as you're talking together, I want you to keep in mind these tools, especially the listening pieces. I want you to think about what's your face saying as the talker, what's your face saying as the listener, what are your eyes saying, what's your body, are you leaning in, are you showing interest, are you asking follow-up questions, are you validating their feelings? And now I know it's going to feel a little bit artificial in this environment. That's okay. Research tells us even when we rehearse things and practice them in controlled environments, even if it feels awkward, it still really can help cement some of those tools. Any questions? Questions? You guys have been so good about hanging in there.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So earlier on, you talked about like some differences that were opposite, like one's physical touch and one's not. You are someone who values that, if you're respectful of the person who's not. And if you're not someone who values it, okay? So when those things are opposite, I know one time you gave a clarification, like whoever's initiating the conversation with them. When you have opposite tendencies, how do you pick? Because I'm guessing, like in our marriage, it would be really easy for one person to always give in to the other,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's only accommodating one way. How do you decide?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I always tell my couples, ask permission. And 40 years later, it can seem really silly, but I have learned if I ask my husband, who's not as much of a toucher, hey, babe, can I just take your hand? Or can I just put my arm, I still ask. And he often will ask, hey, can we not, can I just hear you and not have you hold my hand? Or, and so that, and again, that can feel so orchestrated and so, it just seems so goofy. But as you are married longer, you learn to read each other more. So I think it's really important that, rule of thumb, whoever's initiating the conversation, you be respectful of that person's style, because you want to give them the best chance of really hearing you. So if I'm a toucher, my husband isn't, but I'm initiating the conversation, I want to respect that he doesn't really want me sitting on his lap while I'm trying to talk to him. He needs a little space. He doesn't want me to reach over and take his hand. He just wants to hear me and take it in. Now, if he's got something to tell me or talk with me, he respects the fact that I am a toucher, and it's reassuring to me. He will sit next to me, or he will just grab my hand and start and talk about. Does that help make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I'll turn it to Noelle.
Okay, so so those, I'm gonna repeat those questions,